Music is everywhere. It's been a fixture of most societies for thousands of years, and yet many people say that they are not musical, or at least they have a very narrow definition of what musical means. Today, we'll be talking about how to communicate a subject matter that many people feel intimidated by. We'll also be answering the question, what does it mean to be musical? Let's get into it. Welcome to the Say It Simply show, where we believe nothing is too complex to be explained simply. I'm your host, Emily Schwartz. Let's learn something. Okay, welcome everyone to the Say It Simply show. I was about to say we have a musical guest today, but I think that is the wrong impression that there's maybe going to be a performance, and I don't think that's what we have on the docket today. But we do have a fabulous guest. His name is Dr. Evan Tobias. He is the Associate Professor of Music Learning and Teaching at Arizona State University. Evan, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Emily. Thanks for having me. And thank you all for listening. I'm really happy to be here.
Before we jump too much into it, I do just kind of want to say I told everybody what your job is, but I have a feeling that sometimes when people outside of music
Mm.
hear music professor, they might have a very narrow definition of what that is. Like, oh, so what do you teach people how to play the piano or something? And now don't get me wrong, I've got plenty of friends who do that well, and I'm sure you do
All right.
too, but you're a little different. Your corner of the universe, you have like 17,000 different types of music making. You lead the Consortium for Innovation and Transformation in Music Education. I thought maybe you could kind of start off by telling us a little bit more about that and what
Sure.
your specific corner of music education looks like in terms of your job.
Sure. So I'm a teacher of teachers. So I work primarily with people who are learning to be music teachers and people who are already music teachers and are looking to expand what they do. And the Consortium for Innovation and Transformation in Music Education is sort of a group of music teachers and partners, sometimes corporate partners, sometimes nonprofit organizations. And what we're trying to do is to help people take a look at here's what's going on in music education, and here's what could be going on in music education, and start to work towards those possibilities. Sometimes it's integrating new kinds of technology into music programs. Sometimes it's saying, hey, what else could we do in this band, orchestra, or choir that's a little bit different? And so helping people think through what's next and where is society going. And that's always been an interest of mine of uh, basically saying we do a lot of things really well in music education in all kinds of ways, and there's always new things happening in society. And so how can we keep growing and evolving as people, as musicians, as teachers? And that's a lot of what I spend my time thinking about is what else could we be doing? Not that anything that we're doing is bad, but just what are these other possibilities that are out there?
That's really cool. Yeah, you're not just explaining something simply. You're redefining what possibilities could exist. That's both ambitious and cool, if I do say so myself. No, this is really neat. I mean, you hit the big three, right? The BOC, the band, orchestra, choir, that a lot of
Sure.
people I think of when it comes to music. But everything you said, very future focused, very cool. So I think that kind of leads into my next question, which everybody who comes on the Say It Simply show has to say something simply. That's like the gatekeeping question. So I thought I would ask you, what does it mean to be musical in
Yeah.
today's society? People have a lot of thoughts about that, but I'm curious how you would answer that question.
I would say first that everyone is musical and everyone has the potential to be musical. They just might not realize it yet. And I think that's for me always a starting point that sometimes we think very aspirationally about like, oh, I see these professional musicians and that's what it means to be musical. But being musical could be hanging out and listening with your family or friends to music and being able to talk about it and being able to recognize, I like this, I don't like this. Oh, this sounds like this, or making a playlist on whatever your favorite streaming application is. And being musical can also mean making music. And now there are, you're saying like, what is being musical now? Every year, I'm blown away by the ways that technology and other kinds of systems allow people to be musical with very low barrier entry points. Like, if you have a Mac computer, for instance, it comes with GarageBand. If you have a Chromebook or some other kind of tablet computer, there are all these web-based apps where you can get on them and you can sort of tinker around and pretty, I don't want to say easily, but pretty soon make something that sounds halfway decent and at least it was enjoyable along the way. And with I don't want to get too far into it, but with artificial intelligence and AI, increasing its capacity to do various kinds of things while also teetering on all kinds of ethical issues. So I want to kind of just say that. But it's broadening access again for people to kind of play around with music and try to be musical in various ways. So that creating piece, I think, is doable for everyone now. And then so is performing, like picking up an instrument and if you've never learned how to do it, getting on YouTube and typing in like, how do I learn how to play the whatever, the hurdy-gurdy. I mean, it doesn't even really matter what you want to learn these days. There's going to be videos out there. There's actually MIDI hurdy-gurdies, which is kind of blows my mind. But yeah, you could pretty much get access to ways to support you to learn how to perform an instrument, or someone who's in your neighborhood who teaches lessons. So I feel like there's so many different ways to be musical that have all you need is the desire if you haven't been doing it, and the interest to just get started.
I love that. I love that the first thing you said after I asked you that question was that everybody can be musical. And
Yeah.
I think that's such a key part of your whole message that
Mhm.
I don't know that everybody would agree with. Not, I mean, just like
Mhm.
if you walked up to somebody on the street who just doesn't think they're musical. I talk to these people all the time. They think like, oh,
Yeah.
well, that's not me. I don't have that talent. The fact that you start right off your explanation with, well, fundamental disagreement there. I think everybody has that capacity is really empowering and different. Do you ever get pushback on that with people insisting that they're not? They're like, But you've never met me though. I am not musical."
You know, I think I really started to think about this deeply a couple years ago when my car wasn't working and I was using rideshare a lot to get back and forth to campus. So I work in a school of music. So when people would drop me off or pick me up, they realized I worked in the school of music, and it was usually the people who were picking me up and saying, "Oh, you work at the school of music. That's so awesome. I wish I could be a musician." And I often say like, "Oh, you're probably musical." And they would often say, "No, I'm not," or like, "Maybe I was at some point in my prior life." And I would use that sort of 20 minutes of time of getting from campus to going back to my house to try to make a case with this person, and the stories that would come out were incredible to me because I really started to think about this. I remember talking to one person who he was really into Star Trek, and he remembers this one episode where I think it was like Captain Picard is like playing this like theme on a penny whistle, and he got a penny whistle and learned how to do it. And he's telling me all this incredible stuff of like, "Oh yeah, I watched the episode a bunch of times, learned how to play this thing." And I'm like, that is very musical. Or someone who's like, "Oh yeah, I DJ on the side." I'm like, I wish I could do that better. Like that is very musical. So I feel like people have these perceptions of what it means to be musical, and they might not acknowledge that they're either already doing it or they could be doing it. And so yeah, I do encounter that pushback, but I I- I'm sorry that things happen in society to people to make them feel like they're not, because I feel like when we're very young, like if you watch any young people, they're always being musical all the time. And at
Right.
some point, I don't think we lose it, but we forget that we had it. And it's just a matter of like taking the time to make space in your life to bring it back.
Ooh, I love that. It's not that we lose it, it's we forget that we had it. That's or
Yeah.
have it. That's really cool. I feel like there is a YouTube channel in the making here. If I could be so for real with you, Evan, like Evan has 20 minutes to convince a rideshare person on their commute that they're musical and you could start a jam band at the end of the season. Oh my gosh.
I love
Send the
that.
copyrights out. I think it could
Yeah.
work. No, but that's really cool. And the other thing that you pointed out that I want to just kind of repeat back to you is the number of verbs that you used when you were answering
Mm,
that question. I think a lot of people think, you know, performing or making is the
mhm.
musical part, but the first example you gave was listening and
Yeah, sure.
listening to music. And I wonder if you could talk more about that because I think that that's a verb people don't really associate with being musical. Can you
Yeah.
say more about that?
Of course. So I think anytime that you're listening to music, you're making meaning of it in some kind of way. You might not be using fancy words, like talking about the dynamics or the texture or things of that sort, but you are making sense of it in some kind of way. And people generally can recognize, like, oh, if I hear this music, this fits into this world of other kinds of music that I recognize. And they can make playlists that fit the mood that they're in. Like when I think about my playlist, I have a whole set of like moods playlists. So I have like start off chill or like build up energy. They're like the most boring titles that say exactly what it is, the thing that I'm looking for.
That's
But like
hilarious.
everyone has like the ability to do that. There's like the nostalgia one or nostalgia 2 or nostalgia 3, which are all like very, and so people can do that. And then you can hone in your listening. So when you talk to DJs and how DJs listen, they listen in really interesting ways that are purposeful, right? And then you talk to someone who is the kind of person who's going to identify what music is going to go into this trailer or what music's going to go into this movie or what music's going to go into this video game, and they listen to other kinds of ways. So there's all these different ways. I wonder sometimes about the people who make the fireworks shows. I want to be in the room of like when they decide what firework is going to go to what hit in the music, like, because that's a whole other way of listening that I think is really cool, that I don't know what that's all about, but I think that's a huge thing, is listening in interesting ways. And I also love how I'll go down these rabbit holes of people who make reaction videos on YouTube, and it's like, I don't know if all these people would call themselves musicians, but I think they're fun to watch. And I am always interested in what they're identifying in the music that they're responding to. And I'll just watch like 30 or 40 videos of like different people responding to the same music and how they all get different things out of it. And I think that's just so cool.
That is really cool because you brought up a concept, a related concept with about creativity. We think of,
Mm,
oh, everyone wants to be creative. Everybody who's musical is creative. I'm not musical, ergo I'm not creative. But you just described creative listening,
yeah.
which I don't know that people would necessarily associate, but every example that you just gave is how you listen through a different lens
Mm.
and how and the creative process behind that. I am with you on the fireworks people, man. Let's go do it. I kind of want to go find someone. Anybody listening, if you put together music for fireworks shows, please reach out because we have questions.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
The other verb that you brought up, I feel like this is going to turn into verbs with Evan really quickly, but it's but it's good. It's good. Hey, that's your next conference session right there.
Right?
But the other one was tinkering,
Mm,
and I loved that this was part of your simple explanation because it addresses another thing I think people get wrong about music, which is that there's some polished perfectionism
yeah.
inherent in it. And I love this word that you used of tinker because it's a little playful, and
Yeah.
it also implies that you can just play around with it and you can just experiment, and that's music making. Can you maybe say a
Yeah,
little bit
absolutely.
more about that?
Yeah, I think tinkering, playing, experimenting, whatever kind of verb you want to use is it's very natural when, like, for young, I want to go back to young people. Young
Yeah.
people are playing and tinkering and creating all the time when they're in all kinds of whether it's like playing kitchen or playing with dolls or playing with music, they're just going to try stuff out. And then they get to a certain point where there becomes this sense of like, and it might be like school or society of like, there are right and wrong ways to do things, and there are like more correct ways or more ways to be perfect. And I feel like over time that becomes ingrained in us, and we're not necessarily always invited to be curious and to tinker and explore. And along with me telling everyone like you are musical and you have the ability to be musical is also an associated invitation to like and play and experiment and just try stuff out. And I think of like one of my sons, he'll just go downstairs and there's instruments all over my house. We just like leave them out. Part of it is because we're just very messy and disorganized, just being real. And then the other part is like, because if you have a electronic keyboard or a drum or whatever, just like leave it out so that it's there to play with. But like right next to the keyboard downstairs is like an upside down bin of like probably where a lot of the other stuff should be in it. But like he'll just turn it over and treat it like a drum and just jam out and play. And I'm not going to go over to him and say like, why don't you play this rhythm correctly? Because like that's not the thing in that moment. It's like him jamming and playing out. And I think adults can do that too. And they do that sometimes in secretive ways, maybe like when people aren't watching them. But I think like there's something about jamming by yourself, tinkering. There's something about jamming with other people that is very joyful, and it like unlocks this way of being in the world that I think actually filters out into everything else. um, that if people need an invitation to like not have to think about what's correct or not correct in terms of doing musical stuff, but just like exploring and trying stuff out, then here's the invitation, like do it. And then, yeah, there are certain contexts or circumstances where it makes sense, like, oh, I want to play this song So I'm going to really work at it. And I feel like, oh, there is a way to play this more correctly than. See how I'm even discomforted by even saying like the correct way?
Right? No, I have noticed this. It's excellent.
Like, yes, there are some contexts where like that is the correct way to play it, but there's also contexts where there's some wiggle room. And so I'm not discounting like hone in on something to get as close to perfection, because that's a whole other way of being musical. But there also is like, hey, let's just jam out and make cool sounds together. And then as we figure out like maybe that's not as satisfying, I want to like make something better sounding, then you can get into that when it's the right time. But yeah, there's definitely a space for people to just play and tinker and experiment.
No, I love that. And as you were talking about how yes, there's some things that like do need to be done a certain way, and then some things that you could just do whatever. It kind of reminds me of baking. We were baking cupcakes in our house last week, and there's some things where I'm like, no, 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 this is not the time for creativity. Like, you need to put a tablespoon of baking soda in there, or it will not work. Like,
Right, right.
you can't put a tablespoon of anything else, or you're not going to have a cake. But then there's other things where just because there's a parameter in one thing, there's not a parameter in everything.
Right.
And
Yeah.
that is, I think, is what you're saying. I mean, I was listening to you saying about how we have this fear of like being right and doing it perfectly, and I think that just leads to a whole other level of therapy that maybe we all need
Mm.
together because if it's keeping us from being creative. I love this. I also love the image of me walking into your living room and like tripping on a didgeridoo or something, like just like, oh, there's so many instruments
That
everywhere.
probably would happen.
That might happen in the Tobias household. This is good information. So I feel like you've said a lot about music, which is great, and it has reframed some of the ways I think, and hopefully our listeners think about their own musical ability. I want to turn the conversation to not just you as a subject matter expert in music education, but you
Mhm.
as a communicator and a
Yeah.
speaker and a teacher. Because everything we've just talked about is lovely to chat about on a podcast, but you need to go out into the community and talk about it. And you're
Yeah.
teaching this to undergraduates, graduates, community members. Can you kind of speak broadly to what kind of communication obstacles, barriers that you encounter that you need to get over when you're communicating some of these very future focused ideas?
Yeah, I think the way I would start is just thinking about what I'm one of the things I'm always thinking about when I'm going to be speaking to anyone is like, who are these people? What are their backgrounds? What are their interests? What are their goals? Because if I go into a context and I'm speaking to people as if they're a whole other set of people, I'm speaking to a bunch of band directors who are right at the time of year before they're about to play a concert, and I start talking to them about, wouldn't it be so cool to like do put some digital DJ equipment into your ensemble, which is stuff that I actually do say all the time, but like I'm not going to say that right before the concert when everyone is stressed out about like all this stuff that's about to happen, and getting to like a very good high quality concert and making sure that the students sound great. So it's kind of like knowing who your audience is and knowing what their context and what the time is and things of that sort. So I think figuring out who are these people, because you don't always have the information when you go to a conference setting, for instance. You have a sense of the people, and you can ask them like, who are all of you? Raise your hand if you're this, raise your hand if you're that. So because you're like trying to figure it out, but you might not always know. So I think that's part of it. And then another part of it that I definitely struggle with is you're always learning and you're always going very, very deep, or at least like that's something that I do. I'm always going deep, 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 and figuring out. And as people can hear, I'm probably struggling with it, like even on this podcast, of like, how deep do you go and when do you stop and zoom out other layers? And like, how much should you simplify and how much should you really go for nuance and context, and constantly calibrating in real time, and also trying to calibrate before you go to something is something that I think about a lot. And I'm always trying to get better at that. Those are like
No,
general things.
that's man, that's really great. And it gives me a lot to think about because you said something interesting. Uh, you were talking about different stakeholders and knowing what we need to know and everything like that. I think we all know intuitively that different people are going to have different needs and come from different backgrounds. But the thing that you said that I really latched onto was the timing.
Mhm.
Just because somebody maybe hasn't heard a concept before or it's new, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're not ready to receive it.
Yeah.
But if you give it to them in the wrong moment, you've kind of missed your moment. And I think
Yeah.
that's really critical. It's not so much assessing prior knowledge and all of these good speaking behaviors and good facilitator behaviors that we talk about. It's when are they ready? to receive the knowledge. And that's a really critical piece that I'm really glad you brought up. Um, the other piece that you brought up earlier that I kind of wanted to speak to is you mentioned technology being a part of your conversation and,
Yeah.
different tools that are available for music making and things like that. I know that sometimes when I'm communicating about things that involve technology, I almost don't even want to go down that road
Mm.
because I'm afraid that as soon as I open my mouth, the thing I say is going to be outdated. It's like
Yeah.
outdated as soon as you say it.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that's a struggle that you have or a concern you have. And how do you combat that? How do you just constantly be cutting edge and you feel a lot of pressure?
Yeah. It is constant. I guess I thrive in that, but I would say like the one of the things that I go to is I try not to always talk, and I will talk about what a technology can do in terms of like here's this tool and here are some of the things that it can do as a tool. But I'm more often speaking about principles because principles are less likely to sort of peter out as technology evolves, whereas the technology itself is constantly changing, right? So if I'm speaking to people, I might be more likely to speak about what are the ways that we might think through human technology relationships. Like, how does one work with technology, and what are some of the processes that we use to work with technology? And I could be speaking about the Victrola talking machine, which was like for music educators when that came out, that was like a big to do as well. Because people were freaking out about like what is recorded music going to do to live music making. So there was all of that. Um, and I could have that same conversation about like how do we engage with recorded music when it's first coming out, and I can have that same type of conversation as what do we do with AI as it is emerging and we're trying to figure out what does this mean. It's not the same exact conversation, but that's a principle, that's a way of being in the world. So it's not necessarily like, oh, here's this thing that Suno does on May 22nd, because 3 weeks from now, it's possibly going to be different. It's actually very likely to be different. And the way that AI is evolving is like at such a quick clip that I'm not as likely to talk about that outside. Although, like in my classes, we might be engaging with it just to see like how do we think through this. But we'll also be thinking deeply about ethics. How do we think ethically about technology? Who are the people that are involved? What does it mean to have some kinds of things happening acoustically and some kinds of things happening electronically and digitally? What does it mean in terms of like ownership of ideas and ownership of music? And so when I'm talking to teachers, it's not always about like, here's this tool. The tools are cool, and some people will be against the tools. They are important to talk about because they make the ideas and the concepts concrete. Like, here is this DJ controller. When I do this thing with the wheels, you hear this sound. Then when I press this button, it does this thing. Otherwise, it's all abstract. But then it's like, but it's not about that. It's about like what
Right.
sonic possibilities does this allow for, and how can we create differently with this kind of technology? And then when you swap it out for something else, that has more long term sort of residue. My mentor Janet Barrett uses the term residue in a very positive way, like it has traces with it going through time. And I think that's, you're always kind of looking for like what's going to have the traces, what's going to have the highest impact. So it's not just like, oh, I talked about this thing and 3 weeks later that thing doesn't exist, so now we can go back to the way that things have been because that thing doesn't exist anymore.
You hit on something that a lot of communicators are struggling with right now, which is AI, because that's the thing
Mm,
everybody's talking about right now, and
yeah.
everybody has to go lead a session or teach a class on this. And I think I agree a lot with what you're saying about not just teaching how to do the thing, because you can, let's be honest, you can Google how to do the thing.
Hmm.
It's going to change next week, and information is very easily findable. But the
Yeah.
principles, that's where subject matter expertise comes in. So I think I would say to anybody listening who might be struggling with this, yeah, don't let that be a barrier, right? Don't let the fact that it might be changing be a barrier. Have enough confidence in what you're bringing to the table as the human subject matter expert in, like what you're saying, that the ethics and how to actually use it, how to apply it. Because yeah, you're right. I can YouTube. I'm a student of YouTube University also, so I can learn anything on YouTube. But it's that practical application and leading those conversations that's so impactful from a
Yeah.
teaching and speaking standpoint. So that's fascinating. I'm glad to hear. I'm glad to hear you say all of that. Do you ever get pushback from people who don't think that music education should be going in this way, that like, well,
Yeah.
no, playing in a band and an orchestra and a choir and singing, like that's how to be musical, and yes, this other stuff is fine, but that's not how I want to define music making. I mean, do you ever get pushback from the very idea of what you're doing?
Yes, all the time. Yeah, I mean, I think, and that's not a discredit to any of the people who are pushing back. I think like anytime I'm in a conversation, I always think of things dialogically. So like I would just expect people to push back on a lot of these ideas. And I think anytime you're talking with a group of people, you're going to get a it's I think in terms of continua, there's going to be some people who are like, "Yes, let's go." And then there's going to be other people who are like on the complete other end of like, I like things the way they are and I'm going to keep the way things are. And then people are kind of along a continuum of like, I'm curious about this, not really sure what this would look like. Oh, I can imagine what this could look like, but I would really need support for this. And then people who are like, I'm somewhat skeptical of this, but maybe I could be convinced if I tried it out. And so it's kind of figuring out where people are. But I tend to think of these like for me, this is something that I'm just committed, like not committed to change for the sake of change, but committed to helping people see possibilities and supporting the possibilities that are out there. So for me, it's very longitudinal. If I go into a conversation and I haven't convinced people, and I don't always think I'm trying to convince people as I'm having these conversations. Like if they're convinced, awesome. If they're not convinced, maybe some time from now they will be more open to it, and I'll just kind of keep hearing things. And I'm also learning as people are pushing back what they're pushing back on, and that helps to think through. Oh, that's an interesting perspective. Let me think through that more. So I don't think of these as like yes, no, good, bad. It's all sort of like over time, there are going to be people who are going to be more open to the ideas. Let's work with them and support them. And for people who are not open to the ideas, maybe there's a reason. Maybe there's a very good reason why they're not doing it. And I know, if, like when we're talking about technology, there are very in there are inequities across the country in terms of access and resources. So when I'm talking about a DJ controller, someone might say like, we don't even have internet access or computers in my school, and the ceiling is falling apart. And I'm lucky to have enough chairs for the students who are in the room, which are all like very real things that schools
Right.
experience. So like I'm very
Right.
sensitive to that, and I'm not going to try to go in and be like, but you should be using the DJ controller, and like that makes no sense.
Right. But I took a ride share and I spent
Right.
20 minutes convincing this dude that he should be a DJ. No, what you said was magical, because this is a question I get a lot from public
Uh-huh.
speakers is, but what if they disagree with me? But what
Hmm.
if I present this idea and they disagree, and there's a lot of fear there? And what you're saying is something that I believe very strongly, that yeah, that's an expectation. The
Hmm.
pushback is part of it. It's not something to avoid. It's part of it. It's a
Yeah.
dialogue. You're not
Yeah.
having a monologue of you up there talking. You're engaging your listener in a conversation. And part of that engagement is a little pushback, and then a little pull, and then a little pushback. And you're going to have people that disagree. And it's not something to avoid. It's another ingredient in the communication cupcakes that we're
Yeah.
making, right? It's another ingredient that we don't need to be afraid of. So
Yeah.
I love to hear you say that, and I also love to hear how you're listening to what the pushback might be, and not, disregarding it, that hey, there's people aren't just talking to talk. That's a false statement. Some people talk to talk. Let's just be so real. But sometimes there's really good perspective and really good energy brought into the conversation that maybe we hadn't considered. So just for all communicators, all speakers, all teachers, I think that's a really really important point. So thank you for bringing that up.
Sure.
As we're pushing towards the end here,
Yeah.
speaking of learning experiences, we're going to go into our final thoughts here. I wanted to kind of hear from you if you had a teacher or a class or a training or some kind of learning experience that stands out in your mind as being particularly memorable.
Yeah, I think one of the awesome things about being a teacher and even being a teacher of teachers is how much you're always learning. I tend to think of a class as a learning community. And so I'm going to go back to teaching fifth graders. And one of the things that I realized in teaching a particular group of fifth graders was we were doing a lot of creating. We were talking about creating and performing before. And at the time, I was having them create with electric keyboards. And I noticed that a lot of students, and they were working in these small groups, they were always creating in very similar ways. A lot of their music would sound similar because they would take two fingers on the piano and go like up and down the piano keyboard. The way that they were creating was very I don't want to say driven by, but it was very much in relation to the tool that they were using, the instrument they were using. And so I wanted to experiment, and this was around a time where new music applications were coming out, and so I had access to one, and I said, all right, let's see what happens if I have the students create on this music application. It was called Cakewalk Sonar at the time, similar to like a garage band kind of thing, if people have ever tried that. And I had them get around these computers and use this application, and it opened up all these new ways of them creating. And so one of the things that I was working through and learning at the time was that there is a relationship between what you use to create and how you create. And by kind of shifting the tool that they were using, it opened up all kinds of new possibilities. And I think about that a lot. And it's not just the technology, but like sometimes if something's not working and you're trying to move at it in a particular way, you might just shift the context or shift the thing that you're working on, and it opens up new possibilities. And I thank these fifth graders who, happen to be creating on the piano this way, for opening that space for me to think through, because I don't know that I would have bought it if I had just read it in a book about composing, but experiencing it in real time and watching and hearing what happens when we kind of shifted the context was a really powerful kind of learning experience for me. And it's kind of has stayed with me through my whole career.
That's really cool. I can visualize all of that happening as you were describing it, and can imagine kind of the aha moment of all of that. That's really powerful and really cool.
Yeah.
What a great experience. What about a good book, show, or podcast you've consumed recently that's really stuck with you?
Man, books. I have so many books that are half read because I'm often reading academics like articles and academic books. But I do have a book that I put on my desk, and I was like, I'm going to get through this book, and it's The Water Knife by,
Ooh,
I can never pronounce this person's last name correctly, but Paolo Bacchiagalupi, maybe. But
that
it's
sounds
sort
right
of
to me.
like,
We'll link it. We'll link it in the
yeah,
show
it's
notes.
I think it's in the genre of cli-fi, like science fiction, climate oriented science fiction. Is about like access to water. Like I'm living in Arizona and I'm reading this science fiction, and I'm like, wow, this seems really sort of both dystopian and very real at the same time, and it's very gripping. And so I'm really enjoying that. And it's sort of like my book that I pick up when I need to read. Not I need. I want to read something that's not academic in nature.
Yes.
So I'm really enjoying that book.
Finally, Evan, how can people follow you? How can they keep in touch with you, contact you? What are the ways?
I think the best way is evantobias.net. It's my website. And then I have all my various kinds of like social media. I have a newsletter, podcast, all that kind of thing. So you can find it all on evantobias.net. And yeah, if people are interested in any of the things I was chatting about, get in touch. I always love to like collaborate and partner with new people with interesting ideas. So yeah, hit me up and we'll see what goes on.
Well, Dr. Evan Tobias, thank you so much for joining us today. I think your let's see, what are we going to call it? Sonic residue is going to stick
Ooh, I love
around for a
that.
long time. It's good. It's good, right? It sounds like the name of a band. But no, I think it's going to stick around for a long time and hopefully inspire people to be more musical. So, thank
Awesome.
you for being on the program.
Thank you, Emily.
You just listened to the Say It Simply show. Don't forget to subscribe and visit emilyschwartzspeaks.com for more speaking tips. See you next time.